Y'all, welcome back to Kentucky Fried Wargaming, where two guys who aren't qualified to talk about anything decide to talk about a game with hard math and chance. I'm Joe.
And I'm John.
And on this episode, we're going to talk about a topic that we have sort of danced around before, but has been back in our minds recently, after breaking out of the mold of our usual games that we go to. And that's the idea of winning. And sort of how the community views it, and how we think with a tweak of perspective you might be able to increase the amount of fun you get in games. Potentially. I don't know. We're just two perspectives. But I think it's worth talking about, because the idea of whether you won or lost is not only deterministic, but sort of pervasive in the community as a whole. And I think that's kind of not only a cultural thing, but it is endemic to the hobby. And sometimes it can kind of hurt your hobby if you're too focused on it, you think?
Yeah, and it's not necessarily a bad thing to have winners or losers. It's just, it kind of has a place. And sometimes we put that in its place too many times.
Yeah, so it might be, we figured we'd just take a little time to break it down. But first, a topic with no winners or losers, hobby time, and games played. All right, John, what you been up to?
Oh, I'll have you know, I did win hobby. I'm beating Joseph for the first time in a long time.
I painted 2 squads up.
Yeah, but I've painted and based 2 squads. You've just painted 2 squads, Joseph.
And 3 A Song of Ice and Fire squads.
That doesn't count. Different game.
What? Definitely counts.
I'll have you know, I painted Greyjoys too.
How many?
Oh. Like 4 models.
I knew it. I can do it. You step to me in my house of hobby? No, sir, John. Nay, double
I'll have
nay.
you know, I have been working hard on Berserkers. So I have fully painted, based, ready for the table, finished product, 2 squads of Berserkers. I've converted up my own captain that I'm using like an old Karn model for. I have a Contemptor Dreadnought, because if y'all were wondering, World Leaders comes out soon, and I'm getting started now. We're going to be playing like locally with each other. Small games starting out and kind of building up, playing a bunch. And I've really been trying to push hard into what my style is with my Berserkers. Like when I sit down, what is my most natural comes to me style of painting miniatures? And it turns out it's grimy, dark, and looks like a John Blanche painting. So,
well, your name is John, and you're also grimy. Yeah. So like that checks out.
Yeah, it's ticking all the boxes. And it's been fun. I really enjoy it. There's been a lot of enamels, been a lot of like tastefully done blood effects.
How have you enjoyed enamels, by the way?
I really enjoy enamels. I want to work with them more. It just adds a depth that I don't feel like you get with normal acrylic washes.
Yeah, I don't exactly know how to describe it, but it leaves a sort of like deeper, dusty appearance in addition to the sort of the stuff it leaves in recesses. And if you want something to look weathered and beat up, I think it just does that job better.
Yeah, but if you don't want it to look that way, don't use it. And I think that the weathered beat up effect only gets amplified when you like, because I've been doing the enamels, letting it dry, taking some of it off, and then going back in and adding more details. So like that's where I'll add some blood effects, or like eye lenses, or like glowing bits, or maybe some extra highlights on metal to make it shine a little bit more. For some of the Berserkers, I've added like actual jewelry chain at that point, where it's fresher chain.
Mm-hmm.
And then some of it I purposefully put on beforehand that then gets enameled, right? Like, and it's a mixture of textures and colors and everything else. And I find that adds even more to the effect, which is very useful. And it's been great. I'm excited to do more. This week, I'm planning on painting 10 cultists for the first 500 points, plus the 2 characters. But I'm going to try to take my time with the characters. Like,
Yeah, I mean,
really
they're
take my
supposed to
time.
be special lads, so you got to give them their time in the spotlight on the paint table.
Yeah, and I'm going to be thinking about them a lot while I'm painting them, because I'm also going to write a story about who each is with a name, how they became that.
Mm-hmm. I look forward to
And
that.
it'll be good. It'll be good. And then on your side, Joseph, what have you been working on?
Similar stuff. Last time I talked about how I have been hobbying up quite a bit coming back from vacation, and that hobby train is still going. I painted an entire squad of Sworn Brothers, so that's a third A Song of Ice and A Song of Ice and Fire minis painted up, which was really nice. Got those off the table, and then we started kind of kicking around this idea of starting up Crusade again. Plot twist. Well, I guess spoiler alert. Y'all might hear more about this in a couple of episodes, but we were doing like a big group Crusade game, and it fell apart due to life reasons from a couple of angles, and it was just unfortunate timing. And we're talking about maybe picking something up to try to keep having a concerted effort over the winter to like get together and play games. And to do that, obviously, you got to paint some minis. And because of that, I have been working on Blood Angels again. Damn it, John.
You're welcome. Appreciate it.
Although
They're
this
your boys.
this isn't just John. Also Corwin the bastard. Also his fault. And yeah, when I got into the hobby, Blood Angels was my first like Space Marine army I played because they just look so cool and the story appealed to me. And I ended up stopping playing them for probably not the right reasons, largely because I won with them more often than I felt comfortable with, and I get weird about that, so I jumped factions and probably shouldn't have. But John, much like on last episode, has been hammering on me that I should just play Blood Angels. And this is an opportunity to give that a whirl by telling a fun story in the process. So I have been over here hammering away on Blood Angels and coming up with a paint scheme. I've gotten 2 units of intercessors completely done with said new paint scheme after priming them and zenithaling them. And they're also some of the first minis I built, so there were a lot of mold lines that needed to be cleaned up that were not cleaned up appropriately. But they're done. Although now I'm kind of in a weird spot with them, and I'm stuck because my 3D printer is still down. So I can't really keep hobbying on Blood Angels until I get 3D printer back, which puts me in a weird spot. So my hobby train is still rolling, but it can't keep being on Blood Angels until I have access to printer. So I'm going to step left and go back to A Song of Ice and Fire and paint up some more there until hopefully Frozen sends me parts for my printer. So that's a thing. Oh, and also I'm looking at my table. I painted up a couple of crisis suits for Tau because they were in progress when I got back from vacation and I just wanted to finish them.
Ooh, them robots.
Yeah, I think they look pretty good. They look like the rest of the Tau, but they are custom 3D prints, so their scale is nicer than like GW's crisis suits. And they strike a nice sort of figure on the field. So it was nice to get them painted up and done and get another win on the books. But yeah, I would have kept going on Blood Angels, but curse you, Frozen quality control. Oh well.
You kept talking about A Song of Ice and Fire and reminded me that I played a game of A Song of Ice and Fire since last episode. And it was against Tanner, the boy, the lad.
Yes,
Stannis Baratheon himself.
The Stannis Stan, yeah.
Yeah. So we have this friend Tanner, right? He loves burning people to death.
He does. He does. It's a problem, actually.
But no, I was playing Greyjoys versus his Baratheons, and he. I'm still learning Greyjoys. They're kind of a finesse faction. They do a lot of things well. They do a lot of things not well. And I did kill Stannis. Stannis is dead. Murdered him in his own unit.
Take
but
that.
I only destroyed one Baratheon unit the entire game and lost on objectives pretty hard. So I lost the whole game pretty hard.
Yeah, that's rough. Did you have a good time though?
Yeah. I learned a lot from the game, and I had ideas for my next list, which is, exactly what I want from a game when I go through. Is hey, I tried out some new things. These things worked. These things didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Who cares about winning games when you've only played like 4 games with a faction?
It's true. Similarly, I played a game against my wife of A Song of Ice and Fire over the past week. She put her Starks down against my Night's Watch, and we had a pretty bloody fight back and forth. We sort of lined up along midfield and were fighting for objectives, but she ended up making a mistake that I think kind of cost her the game, where her archers were just a little too close to a unit of my Sworn Brothers, which are like a blender unit from Night's Watch. And then I got a big long bomb charge and managed to get into them early, which also had her commander in it. And I started chopping them up and then was able to sort of mitigate the punch back from a unit that flanked them, and that gave me enough momentum to kind of push the game in my favor by just like pushing that flank hard and holding the middle. So I ended up winning on objectives. But again, like, it was a good time, and we know so little that we were both learning a whole lot each time because we're just taking different units over and over, slowly but surely trying to like feel our way through this game. But man, it was fun. And again, it did not take us very long once we got set up to actually get through the match itself, which is just delightful. So I don't mind necessarily stopping up Blood Angels because I'm still playing A Song of Ice and Fire enough to make me excited to look over there at my unit of Watch veterans and start painting. So I'm probably going to honestly do that tonight when we're done recording here. Well, I guess after dinner, because I have to go watch the finale of House of the Dragon.
I still have an episode to catch up on, and then finale probably later this week.
I have to go see finale. There are dragons. They're dancing. I need this. And it's now fall here, so I'm going to have like warm homemade chicken and noodle soup. That,
look at you.
Plus dragon fights? What a time. Can't wait. Although in those dragon fights, this conversation's irrelevant because there will definitely be a winner. But what about in gaming? Play the music. Hi, John. So, this is kind of a big topic to take on, if we're going to be honest at the start of this. The idea of winning and losing being highly important is ingrained into us from a very, very early age. I imagine it's the same in other places in the world, but here in the States, even with just like kids' pee-wee sports, when you're like 6, people will lose their goddamn minds if you do not win at your tiny little baby sports ball game.
Yes.
And it's really, in many people's mindsets, you lost, well, then it was worthless. And in the worst cases, the losers are worthless. And I don't think it's pervaded that deeply into our own hobby, but like, I think it's worth mentioning the context around the idea before we bring it into game. And I think this is furthered by like a lot of video games where it's either win or lose. That's it. If you play hardcore competitive League of Legends, you won or you lost. You made it out of silver or you're still there. There's really no room for gray in that equation. And I think
right.
that is highly pervasive in our psyche before we step into the tabletop gaming arena. But I mean, do you feel that? Like, do you feel that inherent pull that, like, you must win?
It depends on the setting and like what I'm doing. It's taken a long time for me to be able to not just look at things as win or lose. And I kind of gained the skill from other things outside of 40K. But when I first started playing 40K 100%, every time I sat down and play, I was like, I gotta win.
Mm-hmm.
I gotta build the list that's like cheesy so I can win. Like I used to play Necrons way back when, and way back then it was just a bunch of buff characters and a silver tide, and it was not fun to play against. But I 100% played it because I was like, winning is the point, right?
No.
Yeah.
No, it's not. Yeah, I think there's something to that. I think some people really get hung up on this idea of winning or losing. Some of it to the extent that, like, it invades a lot of our conversations around it. Like, watching Auspex tactics videos to, like, figure out their changes to our war skull to see if that will maybe push it into the percentile threshold in which this unit is now playable in my efficient list. Or just talking about tournament win rates in general as, like, the gold standard of balance, which I disagree with.
Or like judging the entire viability of a game based off of its ability to be balanced
Yes.
on like a national tourney circuit.
Which I also disagree with in some contexts. But like, I think this reaches further than just like, I gotta win or I didn't have fun. But there are some folks who fully feel that way. It's a thing. I get how you could arrive at that point. I was just talking to one of my friends, Mo, and like he's been slowly getting into war games over the past few years, and he's been playing some more. And as you want to do, like he wants to share it with people he thinks might like it. And he has a cousin who is sort of strategically minded, and he was gonna like teach his cousin to play, but his cousin's response was something along the lines of, "Oh, well, like I'm willing to play, but you have to lose. Like, I'm going to do everything in my power to make you lose. Because if I'm not winning, I'm not having fun." And, whew.
What a take.
Like, that's rough. Like, I mean, I get it. If you're very, very competitive, you very well might have no fun if you're losing. But I think that's probably gotta have some problems as a viewpoint. Hence why we think it's worth doing some talking about.
Well, I mean, we can deconstruct that like right now if you want, like right off the rip, top level. If you have that mindset and you're like, I don't have fun when I lose ever, you're not competitive. Like, I know it's a huge generality, but competitive natured and minded strategy game player is test thing. Does this work? No, try again. Like part of that is losing. You don't know if something works until you try it. Like you don't know if something is good until you've practiced with it.
Well, and a strong competitive loss is good data.
Yes. And like if you can't improve as a player until you lose, don't take my word for it, guy who doesn't win tournaments. Like, there's plenty of 40K tournament top tier, top 5, top 8, top players of the country, of the world, who say, practice playing the game, and you're going to lose then so that you win your games at the tournament. Right? Like,
it's going to be a thing.
There's a loss somewhere in that equation.
You cannot win them all.
Yeah, you cannot play a game and always win. And so, from the rip, top level, you should probably reassess why you think that way. And how you can make it less hurtful to lose a game.
Because you will.
Yes.
You're going to lose a lot of them. Especially if you're new to the hobby. You're going to lose a lot of them.
Yes. And if you're a casual player, not competitive, you also want to learn how to lose the game because you're going to, and you don't want to make someone else feel bad in your casual game because you got upset because you lost the game. Like, nobody likes a sore loser and nobody likes a sore winner.
Mm-hmm.
So always aim to be neither of those.
Yeah. It's true. It's entirely true. You know, if you're going to a tournament, your goal is to win, of course. But you've got to learn how to have a good time even if your game plan does not work out. I think it's worth mentioning. And I think the way you get there is by having honest conversation around the concept of victory. And, you know, is it holistic? Is your win-loss ratio the holistic summation of your progress in this hobby that you willingly take part in for fun? Or are there other aspects which influence that? And for me, the answer is the latter, no doubt. For sure, 100%. And I think for most people it probably should be, because this is a hobby. There's got to be some more conversation. And I think for John and I, it's a little easier to kind of see this because of our background. Like, I grew up playing sports, but like for me, my big touchstone was stuff like Dungeons and Dragons and Werewolf the Apocalypse and Vampire the Masquerade and like tabletop RPGs, where it's not really focused around win-loss. Instead, it's more about collaborative storytelling together. And, like, you could make arguments for, oh man, we lost that fight. And, like, yeah, maybe, but, like, did we really lose the fight? Because we told a really cool story while we were doing it, and everyone kind of got to take part and throw a little bit into the pot, and we had stone soup, and it was so good. Which, I think with that as our background touchstone, it is a little easier to see through this fog. But even then, y'all, like, still not immune. Because some games pull you into it.
Yeah.
At least they feel like they pull you into it.
Yeah, and like on my end, I'm going to use my experience when I was younger playing baseball, right? We would win some games, we would lose some games. Either way, our coach always sat down with us and went, hey, why'd you win? Why'd you lose? And then would sit down with each of the players and be like, what did you do that caused you to lose? Or what can you improve? It didn't matter if you won or lost. What can you improve? And with the intention, not so that we keep winning games, so that you become a better player. Because after the season's over, after you've won and lost the games you're going to win or lose for the season, you're still going to be playing the game. So how are you going to improve?
Mm-hmm.
And another example, like Joe, we used to run a LARP town. Like, there's no winning there. That's just telling a story. Like,
yes. Yeah, there's no, like, yeah, sorry, like, the vampiric barbarians are 3-0 this season. Like, it's not a thing.
Okay, but, like, that would be dope as fuck.
We're not keeping tallies of how many times they, like, blew into the death whistle and took someone's skull. Although we should have. God,
yeah,
we should have. We entirely should have. Should have had a blood red clicker just for that. But, like, especially in casual gaming, where you're just playing with your friends, there is, like, more outcomes, I think, than win or lose that determine fun. You know, who's your opponent? Are they a really cool person to play? Did you have a good conversation over the table? Did they give you some really valuable list advice while you were playing? Did they help remind you of some rules that you otherwise might have forgotten? Did they walk you through their entire faction so that you could learn stuff about an army that you might be confused about playing against? Did they tell you some of their valuable units and maybe give you some useful feedback on choices that you may have made and how you could have made them better? Did they say a really funny fart joke that made you giggle really hard in the third round, and that just helped things? Were they a gracious loser or a gracious winner? Like, there's a lot of ways that you could have a good outcome that aren't necessarily tied to just, I won or I lost.
Yeah, and like another good example, going through and being like, okay, well, I'm taking this dreadnought, and I don't care if I win or lose this game. I want this dreadnought to punch something really hard. That's all I want from this game, and it happens in the game. You're like, I got everything I wanted. There we go. Like the amount of times I say that phrase, but just replace dreadnought with something else, or replace punch a thing with something else, and it happens, and I'm still feel very satisfied with the game. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I think that's a good thing to do sometimes. Now, do I still play competitive games with you every once in a while where we are trying, like cutthroat, trying to go at each other? Yeah. But also, sometimes he brings his like chicken nugget loving ogres, and sometimes I shoot it with a ballista and I go, hoo, 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 I shoot big arrow. And he go, ho, 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 I eat you.
True story. Yeah, I think, like, if for people who I think are open to the idea of what we're trying to say, that there are other ways to get enjoyment than just winning, I think for most of you out there, this is already hitting home and you already know what we're getting at. But I want to take a second to just reach the people who may be listening who only are still going, I don't know what the fuck these idiots are talking about. Like, it's win or not win. And, like, I just want to talk to you for a second. There's probably not
How
many.
else am I supposed to pay for this Chinese buffet if I don't win this here Yu-Gi-Oh tournament and get that $25 gift card to that there golden buffet? What do I do?
I would assume get a job, but that's...
No, at a young age, at 8 years old, I watched Yugi beat that one blue guy, Saiba with his blue eyes white dragon.
Seto
And
Kaiba?
yeah, and he was out here beating that American flag bandana guy, rest his soul, and like made a job out of it. And I was like, that's gonna be me one day. That's gonna be me.
Well,
I'm gonna win them Yu-Gi-Oh tournaments, and I'm gonna pay my bills that way.
I now don't have to speak to the players who only want to win because they've turned away. They're gone.
You're fine.
They have turned off. But
if you're still here, welcome.
if you're still here,
Absurd.
why? I get why. But if you are someone whose brain is just wired to think in terms of victory or defeat, like, all right, I can't change your brain chemistry. Lord knows I'm not qualified. I just learned about how to do emojis like 2 months ago. I'm certainly not qualified to give any psychological, neurological advice. But
You're delayed release boomer Joseph over here.
You don't understand. Like I never used GIFs. Like, just it never occurred to me. I typed in full sentences and then GIFs hit and I used GIFs. Like, I never did emojis. And then we were going on this trip west and we made a going west chat, and my wife had programmed it that if you put a bull emoji in the chat, you would get an explosion of bulls around the emoji. So I had to do the emoji to get the explosions of bulls, but I didn't know how to get there to find the bull to do the emoji to get the explosion. But then once I did that, I found out that if you hold the button, you can make the bulls get bigger and then send out giant bulls into the chat where I made a stampede. It was very cool. It's very cool. So I learned how to emoji. And my wife... Don't you laugh at me, John!
Oh, you can motivate Joseph to learn goddamn anything with just, hey, there's an animal involved. Like,
it's true. Yeah. If an owl taught me calculus, I would have done much better in that class. Definitely. Yeah, my wife makes the joke that it is both like living with a 14-year-old and a 70-year-old senior citizen at once. And I think that's a good thing, tentatively. I could build my computer, but don't ask me to like read a text message correctly because I'm just incapable. But, damn it, John, you've derailed me.
that's my entire job. We know I can't like host the podcast or like start the son of a bitch, but I 100% can knock it off its tracks.
But for people out there who have that mindset, I would, instead of just looking at the final game, overarching, capital W win, consider all of the other stuff we said above as small victories and break it down that way. You know, if you get an opponent who's super nice and super cool, very fun, small victory. Did you take the time to learn something new about their force or their list that you didn't know before? Small victory. Did you manage to push your way onto more objectives than your opponent, even if they push you off of them later and sort of outmaneuver? That's a small victory. Did you take the time to be a good sport and maybe try to help them to not make a mistake that they were going to make if you're in a casual setting? Cool, that's a small victory. And in the end, even if you do lose on points, you might get to have a Pyrrhic loss because you got a bunch of small victories during the game that, while doesn't affect your win percentage on the stat card, may increase your ability to enjoy the game that you just played. And really, that's the whole reason that I think this conversation is worth having. Because at the end of the day, this thing we're doing is a hobby. It just is. We're all doing it because it's fun. Whether that's grinding it out on the tournament scene, or the most casual beer and pretzels gaming in someone's garage, you're painting little plastic toys because you think they're fun to push around on the table or they're fun to paint. And in that instance, it only makes sense to try to get as much fun out of your game time as you can. And this is a way you can do it. Simply by trying to shift your perspective or your mindset a little. Because you're going to lose these games, you might as well try to make it a learning experience and to make it enjoyable. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's the sort of elevator pitch behind all of our hippy-dippy nonsense, is that, you know, in the end, it's better for you and your opponent. Because if you're having fun, you're probably a more fun person to play against.
Yeah, and like, even with the competitive natured stuff, you can theory craft and run it on a spreadsheet on averages all day long. But until you sit and play with the thing, you have no idea how it runs. Like, you can take a net list off the internet right now. Pull out the tier net good list that does win in tournaments. Whatever. Play it. Play it against the guy who's been playing Space Marines for 10 years. And see who actually wins that game.
Yeah. Probably the experience.
Yeah. And so the only way to get the experience is to play the game, which means you're going to lose. But every time you lose, you can see what mistakes you made. It's like going over tapes when you're playing football.
Yeah.
Or like the kill cam in Call of Duty, right? You see what happened, and then you go, not do that again.
I see where I messed up. Yep.
And that in itself can be fun. Like, that in itself is where you can get the most joy, I feel like, in competitive play. It's not having the trophy. It's like conceptualizing a list, building it, painting it, testing it, working on it, tweaking it, taking it to a tournament, proving that it works, and being like, hey, I did the thing. I made the thing and it worked.
And also, like, in doing so, finding other players who are skilled to sort of add to a roster of potential opponents to learn from in the off season. Like, if you have these good habits and your goal is to be very, very competitive, you will get more games against high skill competitive players because you will be the sort of person they want to play against. And if you're a casual, well, then this is just good advice. Because if you're like a cool person, you're certainly going to be more likely to get invited over to game nights. Like that. That's just how that works.
Yeah.
It's a win-win for both crowds. And I feel like it's something that is hard to sort of like suss out in like a 5 to 10 minute YouTube video. So we figured it'd be worth breaking apart here. And it's kind of been on our minds lately because we've been playing A Song of Ice and Fire where we don't know anything. Well, I won't say we don't know anything about the game, but like compared to our like knowledge of 40K and Age of Sigmar, we know so much less. I couldn't tell you the meta army. I couldn't tell you the meta list. I could not tell you all the tournament win rates. I could not tell you best units and faction. Like I don't know any of it. So when I play, it's just being like playful and throwing together lists of cool stuff to try. And I found that in that mindset, I'm just having a better time playing it. Because it's not so stressful as, I either got the big win or the big L. But I'm just there having a good time, learning some stuff regardless. And if we can impart that to just a few people, it's worth doing. But there will be some stuff coming up soon in the next couple of episodes. We are really trying to push to get that crusade going. So we're going to have some discussions about sort of that falling apart and how to get it going again. Also, we're kicking around ideas on, creating mechanics for, not us creating mechanics, but like a discussion on how to pick mechanics that are appropriate for your group. And also, I'm really trying to get into more Song of Ice and Fire games so that I can feel comfortable enough to do like a deep dive on some factions. So,
and Darktide.
God, Darktide drops end of November. It was so good. All right, yeah.
Oh.
This is podcast canceled. Job quit. Just playing Darktide. I'm a professional Darktide player.
Yeah, we're just going to stream Darktide. It's great. Do you want to hear me derail a stream? Because that's what I'll do.
Jesus.
You want to see Joe roleplay as an Ogren and me roleplay as a very inappropriate guardsman, and Seth, our editor, roleplay as a very exacerbated psyker?
Big damn hero me. Actual line from the video game. I almost shat myself giggling. It was incredible in the middle of a boss fight. So good.
Yes.
I can't wait to be
good.
Big Dumb Ogren forever. So yeah, the Darktide's also coming out, and we're going to play a lot of Darktide. So if the hobby progress slows slightly somewhere around November 30th, that is why.
But I can't, because World Eater's coming out this winter sometime, but you won't tell me when.
Oh, but you also got the Worldy Warcrafts.
We were going to talk about that, but yeah, you're right.
I ain't talking about it. I got clean.
For now.
I got clean. I walked away. I have little plastic toys to spend my money and time on now.
Yeah, so you went from doing coke to crack. Got it.
Now, I now have a steady dilaudid addiction, John. But I'm very functional in this hobby. Compared to the binge behavior of World of Warcraft. But we do have a lot of ideas brewing, and obviously we're coming up into the holiday season, and we might try to do like a holiday-themed episode, which I think would be fun, and to just have a little bit of time. But until then, if y'all are interested in sort of what we're talking about here, or you have some people in your gaming group who you think really, really might benefit from this conversation, maybe consider sharing the episode. We really appreciate it. Or if you don't have anyone you want to share it with, but you still want to help, adding a like or a rating really helps people find the show. I'm still amazed that as many people find it as they do. And the more people we can get to listen to it who might enjoy it, the better. But for now, that's been all of our opinions. Bonafide Kentucky Fried. We'll see y'all in the next episode.